Darragh here. Darragh O'Brien.
No. And Darragh Ella.
And Darragh Ella.
Gurmagad on Darragh's talk. Gurmagad Ceann Córa. Taoiseach, looking at the papers here and in the UK, I think you'll agree there's a huge contrast on how the draft withdrawal agreement is actually being received. It's a 585-page long document, and it outlines in detail how 45 years of deep integration, protecting certain rights, defining outstanding obligations, and actually sets out a transition period in which both the EU and the UK can adjust. Commitments in this document go up to 2030 and beyond. It sets out how EU citizens who live in the UK will be catered for in relation to their rights, and indeed how UK citizens will be catered for within the EU. One of the protocols in the draft agreement makes unique arrangements for the North of Ireland. This includes protection of rights, security cooperation, and the continuation of the common travel area. In this draft withdrawal agreement, the Good Friday Agreement remains intact. This protocol also outlines how the backstop arrangements, and how these would remain in place unless a separate EU-UK deal actually replaces them. This draft agreement allows the UK to leave the EU on the 29th of March next, which is only in 165 days' time. It is a draft treaty until the EU on November the 26th meet, and more importantly, until the UK Parliament vote on it before Christmas. Our party, as you know, Taoiseach, gave a cautious welcome to the draft withdrawal agreement that has taken thousands of hours of negotiation, meeting and compromises from all sides. It is obviously in Ireland and the UK and indeed the EU's interest to have a Brexit deal. The alternative does not bear thinking about, because it will have huge economic and other ramifications for Ireland and the UK and indeed the EU as a whole. However, the alternative no-deal crash-out may become a reality, and we will have to plan accordingly given what is happening this morning and continues to happen in Britain as I stand here today. The DUP have unfortunately said that they will not be voting for the agreement even before they read it. The Brexit Secretary, Dominic Raab, has resigned his post, and 2 other junior ministers have also resigned so far. 3 now. It shows you how quickly things are moving. We do not know if there will be any more as the day goes on, and while it's a matter for the UK, it does have serious consequences for Ireland and the rest of the EU. Taoiseach, do you accept that these resignations are giving very negative indications for the ability of the UK Parliament to vote for the draft withdrawal agreement, particularly as the British Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn in the UK said this morning that the draft deal, and I quote him, is ill-defined, and that he would prefer no deal rather than a bad deal. Have you, Taoiseach or the Taoiseach, met or are you planning to meet with Mr Corbyn to discuss the draft withdrawal agreement before the vote takes place? And as the EU Council is meeting on Sunday week next, on the 26th of November, do you, Taoiseach, expect changes to the current draft after that Council meeting? And can you confirm, finally, that Government are increasing your preparedness for a no-deal Brexit scenario, as advised by the European Commission?
Thank you, Deputy. And, can I thank all parties in this House for their cautious welcome of the draft text of a withdrawal treaty that was supported last night by the British Cabinet and that we expect will be supported also by the European Council. This has been a long and at times a very difficult negotiation, and I want to pay tribute to the Irish teams of negotiators and diplomats in particular who have done an extraordinary job to build and maintain EU unity around many of the Irish vulnerabilities and questions. I also want to thank Michel Barnier for his extraordinary capacity to understand the detail of the multiple concerns and questions that have come from this island in the context of Brexit and its potential fallout, and for accommodating all of the commitments that have been made to Ireland and to the EU by the British Prime Minister and her government during these negotiations to date in the legal text that was delivered last night. There were many commitments made in a political statement last December. Those commitments were added to again in March, and I think many people were sceptical as to whether they could be translated into a legal text that could be sold on both sides of the Irish Sea in a way that protects this island, the relations on it, north and south, in a way that does not in any way undermine the constitutional integrity of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland, but in the same way provides pragmatic solutions that can ensure that we do not face the prospect of physical border infrastructure or related checks or controls between the two jurisdictions on this island. And I think that is what this agreement does. It involves compromise, it involves flexibility on both sides, it has involved a response from the EU side to the British Prime Minister's demands that Northern Ireland couldn't be separated from the rest of the United Kingdom in the context of a customs territory, and that issue has been resolved. So what we have is a deal and a text that follows through on the commitments that have been made and does so in a way that protects Ireland's core interests now and into the future, in a way that we can all stand over, I hope. Of course, there are challenges to selling any package in the United Kingdom and in Westminster. Many people would say that there isn't a majority for any way forward in the House of Commons. And so the British Prime Minister has said last night that she faces difficult days ahead, and I'm sure she does. But she is resilient. She has shown a remarkable capacity to get things done in very difficult circumstances. And certainly we want to work with her and support her in the context of the future relationship negotiations that need to happen to ensure that the backstop that is now catered for in this agreement never gets used. And I hope we will have the opportunity to do that.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy O'Brien.
Taoiseach, I did ask whether you had any plans, whether you'd met the British Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, or whether you plan to do so. So you might answer that question when you come back in. Look, we all acknowledge that there are deep and serious concerns within the UK. And I would say, Taoiseach, that there's no triumph in negotiating something which can't be delivered. So we all need to be mature about this. And I would say further that the time for victory and celebration is when this draft agreement is accepted and ratified by all. I think you and your ministers should be acutely aware of the impact of comments made here in Ireland during a very sensitive and volatile situation in the UK. And I would ask, Taoiseach, that you, your colleagues in government, to try from today to resist the temptation to brief in vitriolic statements to the press, as we have seen in some of the Irish newspapers today. I think that's irresponsible, and I think you should desist from doing that. You put the national interest first in this instance. So a lot of time and effort has gone in by your government, and indeed with the support of the opposition. So I think every statement being made in Ireland here is being scrutinised, and we should be aware of that. Silence from government worked on Monday and Tuesday, and I would ask you to go back and be silent maybe for the next day or two, and to let the process move through Westminster. We have to be conscious of that. I would ask, though, that in relation to contingency planning, and I heard Minister Donoghue this morning saying that a lot of very detailed work has happened, will you now publish the sectoral contingency plans on the basis of a no-deal scenario, and actually let the sector see what level of preparedness we actually are at this moment in time in Ireland?
Yeah, well, Deputy, first of all, can I say that we speak to all political parties across the United Kingdom all the time. I've got to know Keir Starmer well, who's the Labour spokesperson on Brexit. He's a very fine person and is on top of the detail. And we will continue to have conversations, of course, with all political parties. But I think the Irish government needs to be careful not to be pretending that we can influence British politics, and not to try to do so publicly either. Because we might well find that it will have the opposite effect. There is a British political system that needs to tease through the detail of this text. That will happen in the coming days and weeks, and there will be a vote at the end of that. We will have a detailed debate here too, and I can assure you that neither the Taoiseach or I or Minister McEntee or any other ministers for that matter are going to be claiming victories or anything like that. That has not been happening. Yesterday we were very careful not to comment when it wasn't helpful to do so, but we do have an obligation. We do have an obligation to explain to the Irish people what has been agreed. And we have an obligation to both explain that and to reassure people that it deals with core Irish concerns. Because there are many people out there who are very sceptical that it was possible to get this deal done. And it is the role of government to be able to explain to people in appropriate language why this deal is no threat to nationalism or unionism in Northern Ireland, why it's no threat to the sovereign integrity of the United Kingdom, but instead this is a practical compromise by all sides to allow for a managed, sensible Brexit to move forward in a way that protects core Irish interests and ensures that we are not the collateral damage from an unmanaged or a Brexit deal that doesn't take into account the interests of Britain's neighbours as well as Britain itself.